Are relationships dead today? We're going to dive into this and uncover what the state of the union is for relationships and dating in modern times and how you can actually bypass a lot of the issues that we're seeing, what those issues are, how you can navigate the landmines that are existing so you can have a happy, loving, long-term committed relationship regardless of what kind of craziness or challenges or setbacks are happening in our modern relationships and dating world that we're in. So I'm Brody Boyd with Magnetize Your Man. In case you don't know me, I've been helping thousands of successful women to have and attract a loving, long-term committed relationship with my wife, Antia, for over 20 years combined. Today, joined with
Kevin Anthony, and I'm a certified sexologist, NLP practitioner, and sex, love, and relationship coach. And I have been helping men, women, and couples have the relationship of their dreams and the best sex of their lives for over a decade as well.
A lot of expertise here. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I think Kevin has some interesting stats he wants to share first off on the state of the union with relationships right now.
Yeah, so the premise of this video is, are relationships dead? And I would say they're not dead, but they're on life support. And we're going to get into all the reasons why that is. But before we do that, I thought it would be kind of interesting to share a few stats with you, because when you hear us talk about the reasons why relationships are struggling in the modern times, some of you may be thinking, well, yeah, but aren't some of these advances? Aren't some of these things better? Haven't we moved past the old antiquated systems that no longer serve us, right? And I'm going to tell you the answer to that is actually no.
Actually, quite the opposite.
and I've got the stats to prove it. So
okay, let's hear it.
I'm going to quote a few articles. One is from February of 2024. It was on CNN. And it says, adults who are married report being far happier than those in any other relationship status, according to a Gallup poll. Notice what that said. Any other relationship status. So those of you who are thinking, well, if I just be poly, or if I just do solo poly, or if I just do this, that, or the other thing, right? Not according to the data. Any way you analyze those data, we see a fairly large and notable advantage to being married in terms of how people evaluate their life. From 2009 to 2023, more than 2.5 million adults in the United States were asked how they would rate their current life, with 0 being the worst possible rating and 10 being the highest. The researchers asked the respondents what they anticipated their happiness level would be in 5 years. Over the survey period, married people consistently reported their happiness levels higher than their unmarried counterparts, ranging from 12 to 24% higher depending on the year.
Wow.
So upwards of literally basically 25% or a quarter happier on a scale.
Yeah, that's like the difference between a Happy Meal and eating at a Thanksgiving a full Thanksgiving dinner.
It's huge. Like nearly 25% happier.
Yeah.
How would your life be? Look at how your life is right now, currently in this moment. How much better would it be if you were 24% happier? That is massive. All right, but I got more.
Let's hear it. Well, wait, there's more.
Exactly. Psychology Today. Decades of research have shown that people who are married are on average happier and healthier than those who are not.
Wow.
Now, I didn't pull up the stats for health stuff, but I have seen them in the past, and they do show that, it's funny because the stereotype always is once you get married, you get fat and lazy and out of shape, and you're typically less healthy. But that's actually not what the stats show.
Wow.
Well, one of the reasons, of course, for that is because your psychological health.
Yeah. Stress itself causes so much health issues. And when you're in a relationship, generally, if you're in a healthy relationship, you're going to have less stress. But even just us being social creatures, having that regular bonding, that itself reduces stress levels because you don't feel like you're surviving by yourself in the jungle of the world. You have at least somebody by your side helping you through it, I imagine.
Yep. So I got one more for you. This one comes from the Institute for Family Studies. And they said, indeed, married people are happier than unmarried people across nearly 5 decades of surveys. Data from the GSS, which is the General Sociological Survey or something like that. I forget exactly what it stands for. But data from that survey shows that 36% of people who have ever been married, including divorced, separated, and widowed people, say they are very happy, while just 11% are not too happy, compared to 22% and 15% for people who have never been married. So what that's saying is, like, on the high end, if you've never been married, you're reporting about a 22% happiness rating. Whereas on the ever been married, like even if you're divorced or widowed, that group is reporting 36%.
Wow, right? That's interesting.
So that's still a significant difference going on there.
I wonder what that's about. That could be around maybe the child factor that may be added into that, if there's the ongoing benefits of having children that continue past the relationship, or it could just be the fact that maybe also the type of person that does get married has a lifestyle that causes them to be happier than the ones who just have a single lifestyle.
Well, you're married. Mm-hmm. I was married until my wife passed, and I can honestly say that the happiest years of my life were when I was married. But I will also say that if you are in a happy marriage and a functional marriage, well, really any marriage, but specifically a happy or functional one, it changes you. You're not the same person when you come out the other end that you were when you went in.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can potentially be for the worse if you went through something very traumatic or abusive. But if it wasn't traumatic or abusive, most likely you're going to come out the other end a better person.
Wow. Yeah, it's transformational. Me and my wife always say that some of the greatest areas things that you can do in your life that cause you to grow the most is like having kids, getting married. Well, hopefully not in that order. Getting married, having kids, and starting a business is a big one too. Mm-hmm. Being an entrepreneur, you're going to rapidly have to improve yourself and grow yourself because of the things that'll come up in all those areas. As many who are watching probably are aware of, who have had kids or who have been married at some point, that it does transform you. So that's the good news, is that actually in the modern state of relationships and dating, relationships are king in a way. Relationships are still winning, as this is the healthiest, happiest way to be in, have a status in your life then it was what the options are out there still. So some people may say that singlehood is great and it's never been better to be single. Well, actually statistics aren't showing that still, and that'll help us with some of the things we're going to go into next. Mm-hmm. If we're ready for that,
let's dive in.
So let's go into some of these problems that we're seeing in modern dating and relationships, and then some of the solutions as well. So one of the big ones I'm sure that you're aware of, those who are watching right now, you've seen, is the overdependence on technology. So this has caused a huge wrench that has been thrown into humanity, through causing a massive shift in how things were done for thousands of years, because now we have the instant gratification culture, and the technology provides that, where we can get faces, we can start chats with people all over the world instantly almost, especially if you're an attractive woman. You'll have a lot of options right away when you go online, but that's not necessarily a good thing. As we've also seen with the paradox of choice, the more options you have, actually the less satisfied you end up being when you make a choice, when you pick somebody to go on that date with, and when you select, because you're like, oh, well, I could have been on a date with James, or the guy's thinking I could have been on a date with Sarah, or do I really want to commit to Susan when all the other women who are out there? And so it just causes us to have all these other ideas and fantasies about what we could be having rather than what's real. So that's what's right in front of us potentially. And so that's one issue. And then the other one, and I want to get your thoughts on it, Kevin, the other thing that technology is causing is this idea that we are now communicating more frequently with people via technology rather than in person. And that means text messages, that also means emails, that means social media, and at best that means FaceTimes or Zoom calls or phone calls, but still not necessarily replicating the value that we get as humans being face to face, that we've had for thousands of years, that we've lost with these technological abilities to communicate. So what are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, quite a few years back, my wife Selena and I did an entire podcast, and I believe it was titled something along the lines of Why Technology is Ruining Your Relationship. Mm-hmm. And we thought it was a fantastic episode because we had the receipts, man. Like, we had the data to show you how and where technology was getting in the way and causing more problems. It was like one of our lowest rated episodes ever. Why? Because people just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it.
Because the ones who would appreciate it, they weren't listening to your podcast because they're not using technology.
They are so addicted to their phones and the technology that it's just like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. They didn't want to pay attention to it. But the reality is the technology absolutely is having a major impact. Now, as anything, it can be used to enhance your relationship, and it can be used to make it worse. And unfortunately, what we see more often than not is that it's actually making the relationships more challenging. And so that's just something that people really have to pay attention to. So one of the biggest things that I see, and it's something that I'm constantly talking about, and in the Magnetize Your Man group, this subject comes up all the time, because I will have a woman come on and tell me, well, I had this conversation, and here's what I said, and then here's what he said, and then like they make it sound like the conversation was an actual conversation. And then when I ask some clarifying questions and dig a little deeper, I find out it was a text message exchange.
Yeah.
And as soon as I hear that, I go,
long one.
Now half of what you just said makes sense, right? Because there was massive miscommunication in there between them, because they were using text. And that's just one example. But it's a very good example and a very common example of how technology can get in the way. So this idea that we can communicate immediately, anytime we want from anywhere, sounds great. Theoretically, this should enhance our ability to communicate with our partner. But the problem is you lose all of the nonverbal communication. You can't see facial expressions, right? There's so much data that we take in when we sit and talk to somebody that you don't get over the technology. And when that's stripped out, you have massive opportunity for misunderstanding. And it's a real problem. But that's not the only way. I mean, when we're talking about technology, another common problem with phones is that or any technology, really, computers, the TVs with the streaming, everything, is people are putting just too much attention on those devices and not paying attention to the human in the room next to them. Right? And so I can't tell you how many times couples tell me, oh, we're just too busy. We don't have time for a date night, or we don't have time, to make a sex date, or, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, how many hours did you spend watching TV? How many hours did you spend doom scrolling on social media? You mean to tell me, look, I know the average person, unless they've really put time into learning how to be a sexual master, their sex is only like 15 minutes long. You're going to tell me you can't find 15 minutes to connect with your partner? Of course you can. You probably spent 2 hours doom scrolling.
Yeah, well, you can look at some of those apps, depending on what kind of phone you have. You can look at the stats on your own phone about how much time you actually spend on different apps, and it can be really revealing and shocking. Me and my wife had an incident a couple months ago where she was accusing me of being on my phone too much, which I didn't like that, and we had a conversation around it. And then I actually challenged her, and I said, let's compare the stats on our phone and see who's actually using it more.
Lucy, you got some splaining to do.
Yeah, that was a fun conversation. But so it's very revealing for yourself and potentially for you both to do as an exercise as a couple, just kind of, interesting. Like how we each use our phone habits. And that's not making anybody wrong, but it's just to bringing some awareness to it, so it gives you a better context for yourself and for the relationship as a whole of how you guys actually are spending your time and your attention, where that's going. Because some of the solutions to this issue are some basic things I like to teach our clients. One of the big ones is that your phone should really only be used as an appointment setting device. Now, the interesting idea with that is to think of it as, what if you could only use your phone to set appointments? What if that was the only purpose, like in relationships? So it's either setting up a time to talk or setting up a time to meet in person, and that's it. You can't really do anything else other than that. How would you change how you use it? And it's an interesting exercise and actually a powerful thing to do if you can practice it. And we teach our clients how to do this so that you can actually just have real conversations with your guy, or you have actual meetings in person with your guy. And we teach you how to do it, how to set it up, how to communicate with him in a feminine way to actually have him want to set those up with you and meet in person, so that you're not caught in those long text message exchanges where what happens is it's so easy to have misinterpretations as well via text because of the reasons you were saying, that body language is reduced, voice tone is reduced. Sometimes even you just misspell something on your phone, typos happen, and it can completely shift the interpretation that the other person has around what you're meaning, because it's already hard enough to communicate something when you have all the other things working for you, and to get that actual image that you have, the data that you have in your head into the head of the other person. But then when it's just over text, you're missing so many other cues that will lead it to be misinterpreted, which will cause issues likely, where the person thinks you meant one thing when you meant something else, or if they thought you were angry when you said something but you weren't, or you thought the other thing and you have to interpret it. What did he actually mean by this? So you eliminate so many of those things when you just avoid texting and keep your phone as an appointment setting device. Now, the other aspect that goes into this is when you talk about dating, for the single women out there, all the single ladies, when you use your phone to just find events to go to send out invites, to respond to invites, to go to dates. In online dating, you can still do online dating, but just try to get it to that first meeting as quickly as possible. Don't spend a lot of time just being pen pals. And then when you are going out to be social, and actually find events and hobbies and activities that you enjoy, that light you up, that you would find fun. And I recommend this even if you're in a relationship. You should never sacrifice fully your social life. You know, my parents did that when I was growing up, and it caused a lot of pressure on them to just be everything for each other because they didn't have a real social life outside of their marriage. So to expand your social life and find hobbies, activities, events, fun, things to do with friends, gatherings, dinner parties, etc., so that you're getting all those emotional needs met outside as well from other sources, not just your partner, because that's a lot of pressure to put on one partner. And we're social beings. We're not meant to just interact with one person our whole life or by ourselves. We're meant to be in community and meant to be with others. So just practice that. Get out of the house and show up. You know, Woody Allen says 80% of success is just showing up. So get out of the house and show up, and that'll already start dramatically improving your happiness and your social life, and likely your relationship too.
Yeah, I have a bunch more things to add around technology and how you can prevent it from being a problem in your relationship. So just a couple quick things are, you have to have some boundaries around the use of these devices, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, like, you know, on date night, you know, my wife and I, we had basically 2 rules for date night. And rule number 1 was that we're doing something together. And we would tell that to a lot of people and they would laugh. Well, of course, it's date night. Of course you're doing something together. I go, but it's not that simple, because you could be sitting there staring at a TV screen together.
Yeah.
Right? But you're not really actually interacting with each other. So by together, what we meant is focusing on each other. That means we're not looking at phones. We're not watching TV screens or even movie screens or anything like that. We are focusing on each other. So the technology goes away is the point on that one. The second rule is at some point in the evening we had to be naked, but that's a whole other thing.
That helps with the attention piece.
Yes, it does. But you got to set some boundaries around that. For instance, Celine had a boundary that literally phones weren't even allowed in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. Like phones do not come in the bedroom, even if we're just going to sleep.
Yeah.
Why? Because what do most people do when as soon as they hit the bed? They're on their phones. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So the idea is to put boundaries around the technology. The other thing is always, if you have to have an agreement in your relationship, any sort of serious conversation has to be face-to-face.
Yeah.
If you cannot be face-to-face, get on a video call. You can do video calls on FaceTime, on Signal, on WhatsApp. I mean, like every app that's out there, basically nowadays, you can do a video call. If you can't do a video call, do a phone call. If you can't do that, okay, maybe you can say a few things on a voice message. But text is not even on the list. It's not even on the list, right? Text message is like, hey, honey, can you pick up some bread at the store, right?
Yeah, so logistics would be another thing, like appointment setting, logistics.
Yeah.
Those are fine for phone usage, for text messaging.
Exactly. So you have to really set some parameters around how you'll use the technology. Yeah,
think of it like in the ancient, not ancient times, but earlier times. I don't know what you would call that period, when they were sending they had the telegrams, right? And so even with telegrams, it was only like, because you had to pay so much money back then equivalently to get a message out, it was very like specific information, usually updates, critical news, logistics, business stuff, so it was very very sparse and very important messages only that were communicated via text that were like urgent stuff or logistics. And so you can think of it like that when you're using your phone as well. Like, oh, if this was like a telegram, or if I had to use Morse code, how would I just communicate the critical things and not have long kind of drawn out communications and novels that are sent via text? So that's very important. And the other thing I wanted to mention was airplane mode. So one thing that I think causes a lot of people to be addicted to their phones and to be constantly put back on them is because they're getting notifications. So I keep my airplane mode and I keep my phone in airplane mode almost all the time, just when I'm about to use it, and I take it off airplane mode. And then also you can reduce and turn off a lot of the notifications on your phone. So even when you're off airplane mode, you're not getting a bing, 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 and it's just like, oh, now I'm back into it and I have to respond to this and I have to do this and this. Keep it silent or hide it, like you said, and what Celine said, put it away. Don't even let yourself have access to it sometimes.
And I mean, you might even want to rethink what apps are really necessary to have on your phone. So for me,
just delete them.
I have no social media apps on my phone.
Yeah.
I don't want any of that stuff on my phone.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes it's a bit of a hindrance because some of these social media apps will only let you do certain things via the
especially
mobile
if you're
version.
running a business or something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I run into it when I'm trying to manage my business, social media accounts. But I just don't want that stuff on my phone. I don't need it on my phone. It's not that I can't control myself. I actually have great control over how I use the phone. I just don't need it. I don't want it. And the temptation's not even there.
Yeah. And, speaking of communication, because it's so important once you're in person with a man on a date or talking with him on the phone, that you know what to say and you actually know what to communicate that draws him in and that makes him desire you, makes him want to have a committed relationship with you. So if that's something you want to master as well, we do have our special Magnetize Your Man quiz that I want to let you know about, that you can get by clicking the link in the description below or going to polarityquiz.com, and would highly recommend, so you can actually learn and master the principles of magnetic feminine polarity, magnetic feminine communication. So click the link below to get that. And then the next piece I wanted to go into, the issue that we've noticed with social media, or we talked about social media, but let's go into this one as well, which is pretty important and related, which is also when you're using social media specifically and you're online, there's a lot of comparisons that can happen. So one issue that can happen is when you go on social media, everybody tends to be posting the best highlights of their life, which you probably know about.
And using filters.
Massive and now filters. AI, so many AI tools, and everything's fake, right? Everything's ideal. And you see your friends and you see other relationships, you see other women, and you're like, oh, they're so beautiful, and it's all mostly fake. I mean, not mostly, but let's say...
No, it's mostly fake. It is actually, that is a correct
There's
statement.
literally fake accounts that are just AI generated, like OnlyFans girls and women that are online that guys are getting sucked into, which that's another issue we'll talk about.
But even if they're real accounts, like we said, the filters completely change your appearance.
Yeah.
The way they're edited, the music, like you said, they're only showing the best moments of everything. It's not real life.
Yeah.
So my wife, Celine, refused to do like filters or like even airbrush photos or anything like that. So any photo you've ever seen of her is straight up, that's what it looked like, right?
Wow.
And she used to say that whenever she would see a client would show up for the first time in person, because she used to see a lot of clients in person.
They'd be like, who are you?
No, one of the first things they would always say is, you look exactly like your photos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because they're not touched up. How many times, like you see this in the dating space too, right? It's like you're swiping, right? And you go, oh, wow, she's hot or he's hot or whatever it is. Then you see them in person. You're like, you're meeting for the first time. They're walking into the restaurant or bar and you're like, is that... Maybe, I think that's him, right? You should know, because they should look exactly like the photos.
Yeah, I mean, we can get a whole conversation around how, like, also makeup is, could be part. If we're looking at it as a spectrum of like authentic, fully 1000 authentic, real, no makeup, no filters, and then there's like the complete AI version of somebody that's totally, literally fake. Where's that line, right? And so everyone, I think, has their own personal choice of where they want to go in that spectrum, where they want to draw the line for themselves and what's appropriate. But what we're talking about specifically here is also just realizing for yourself how fake it is and not letting yourself get caught in too much into comparison of other people's relationships, other people's appearances, their lives, quote unquote, or what it appears to be on social media version of their lives. Because it's causing a lot of damage, especially with teenagers right now. So if you have a teenager, I'm sure you're already aware, but the depression rates are very high, anxiety rates are very high, unprecedented levels. A lot of it is caused because of this, because of mostly Instagram, But there's many platforms out there now, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. I think Instagram is one of the big ones because it's so visual and everything is so filtered and so quote unquote faked. But yeah, just to realize for yourself, and when you go on your online dating apps, just to take a perspective that this is all essentially fake, and that you don't know who this person is until you meet them in real life. You don't know what someone's life is until you meet them in real life. So it'll help you to avoid comparing yourself to other women, comparing your relationship to other relationships, and also the men that you're meeting online and that you're seeing online, to take them with a grain of salt, that you don't know who this person really is until you meet them. And to practice instead, we can go into some practices too. Gratitude, appreciation for your own life, how you have it now, the things that you love about your life, the things that you love about yourself, and your partner. If you're in a relationship right now, become grateful for what you do have, rather than comparing yourself to the other couples online or other situations you see in movies on TV. Like, be grateful for what you have in your life, because you'd probably be shocked about all the closets and skeletons in the closets that a lot of other people are hiding off of their social media you don't even know about. Like, they're on the verge of divorce. The partner recently cheated on her, or she cheated on him, or that woman that looks so beautiful, she's actually struggling with massive health issues that you would never want to have in a million years, or she's dyslexic, or who knows what else she's dealing with. So you just come back to yourself, come back to your own life, focus back on your energy on yourself, and become grateful for where you are, what you have, the things you've achieved up until this point, the things you've done, and the things that you love about yourself, your personality, your appearance, those small things. Do you have anything else to say about those?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is, just so you know, we, of course, practice what we preach, and neither Brody or I have any makeup on, and we're shooting this in high res, right?
Yeah, so, I washed off all my makeup before I came on this podcast, so you can get the real version.
See is what you get. I even, Zoom, I do a lot of, calls over Zoom with clients.
But we're guys, so it's not saying a whole lot for that.
Well, I know. I was really saying that as a joke,
yeah.
But Zoom has a setting that's set by default that kind of smooths out your face.
Soft face and all that.
And one day I realized that was on, and I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Screw this! I'm turning this off." I'm like, "You're gonna see me the way I am." Yeah. Now, why is that important? Yes, I'm making a joke about that, but this has been a problem even before technology was around, right? Because we had, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, or any magazine for that matter, or movies or TV shows, where we're always comparing ourselves to these people that are, on the far end of the spectrum of looks and that sort of thing. So it's been a problem for a really long time. Technology has exacerbated that problem significantly. It has really made it a lot worse, especially for the young people. So because of that, you have to try extra hard. So the first thing you need to know is that most of what you're seeing is fake, which I think we drove that point home pretty good, right? Once you understand that, then you're no longer trying to compare yourself to something that isn't real to begin with. And then the second point really is what you hit on, which is you have to establish the self-love. It's just really, really important. You have to establish it. In fact, I'm working with a client right now in my coaching practice. It's a female client. And she is actually struggling with, some body image issues, right? So one of the practices that I gave her to do was, I said, every day you need to sit in front of the mirror and look at yourself and tell yourself 3 things that you love and or appreciate about yourself. And then I want you to come back to me 2 weeks from now when we meet again and tell me how that practice went.
Yeah.
So she comes back to me to tell me how that practice went. And she's like, the first couple of days it was easy, no problem. And then it got hard. And she said, it got so hard, she's like, I didn't want to do it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Wow. Why was it easy in the beginning? It was easy in the beginning because you can fake it for a little while, right? Mm-hmm. But the more you keep saying it, the more real it gets. And at a certain point, she was realizing that she didn't have the level of self-love that she thought she had or that she needed to have.
Wow.
Right? And so just that simple little practice was like a big light bulb. Like, I realized I don't love myself as much as I should. And so how can I expect other people to love me for who I am if I don't actually love myself?
Yeah, right? That's great. The other great example I give some of our clients is write a love letter to yourself. Basically meaning you write down on paper all the things that you would compliment about yourself if you were somebody else, and things that you love about your appearance, things that you love about your character, things you've accomplished in the past, good memories. And you just really write it as if you're like romancing yourself and loving yourself up, but write it down, and then you can review that too. That could be part of the morning exercise, like reading the list, going through it, and you can add to it. You can add those things that you compliment yourself on. They could be small things or they could be big things. And that'll help over time to shift your own perception of yourself, and so that you don't get caught as much into comparison or feeling bad about yourself in some way. Like, amplify and focus your mind on those good things, because there's people out there that are much happier than you and who have much less than you do in terms of looks, in terms of personality, in terms of life experiences. And so just emulate that and imagine that for yourself. Like, what if you were to be happier with yourself? What would that look like? How would you think differently?
Is it in the Bible? I can't remember if this is in the Bible or not. It's in a spiritual text, but it's basically that envy is like the root of all suffering.
Yeah.
Or
envy.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, well, envy is one of the 7 deadly sins.
Right.
So yeah, that comes from...
That's the whole idea of looking out at somebody else and going, oh, I wish I could be them. Oh, they're so good looking. Or, oh, they have the perfect relationship.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
That.
Well, that's why they call it a deadly sin, because it's literally like you're killing yourself.
Yeah.
You're killing your own self-esteem when you do that. You're killing your own confidence, your ability to actually be enviable or be admirable, because you're so focused on the other person rather than yourself, which is not easy. Some of these things we're teaching is not. We know it's not necessarily easy, and it can be simple but not easy, and it's going to take some courage. It's going to take some practice and help, support, ideally, being a community of other women who are doing this as well, like in our memberships, so that you naturally doing it. You naturally become this high-value, magnetic, feminine woman. You don't even have to think about it anymore. So,
one of the things that's really beautiful about that community is that it is supportive. One of the things that, if ladies who are watching this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've heard this from quite a few different ladies. But women generally amongst each other are the worst as far as criticizing each other or talking behind each other's backs about how fat she is or this, that, or the other thing. They tend to really be pretty difficult, and so a lot of women don't have...
Just watch The Bachelor if you don't want to see what that's like.
A lot of women don't have the support system of other women in their lives who can actually encourage them and support them, and that is something that we see in the group, in the community a lot. There's a lot of encouragement and
it can
support.
Be very healing to be in a community like that, where women are lifting each other up fully, rather than any kind of tearing down or even comparison. So that's great. Which leads us to the next piece, which is the rise of hookup culture. So society goes in waves and it fluctuates. And we've been in this wave in modern Western society of going into, we might say, the debauchery phase, where it becomes about sleep with whoever you want. Doesn't really matter. Sex is just fun. It's kind of meaningless.
There are no consequences.
There's no consequences. We have birth control now.
It's more fun.
Just have fun, enjoy yourself, and explore who you are, explore what you want, explore your desires. And this happens on the women's side, and it also happens on the men's side, where it's like, bang chicks. I mean, that's always kind of been a thing that guys have always wanted, to sleep with as many women as they can. But now it's usually that there's an old saying that women are the gatekeepers of sex, and what has happened because of fourth wave feminism, well, really feminism period, but we can go into all the effects, the causes of this, but women have kind of opened the gates, right? A lot of women have in society opened the gates and said, like, here, like, just let's have sex, let's just do it, let's have fun. I mean, a lot of this started in the 60s, but it's still been kind of in that wave, and generally has progressed upwards, which is actually interesting, because now, actually, with the younger generations, they aren't having as much sex, even though we're in a hypersexualized society, which is fascinating in and of itself, which means that there's that urge still to want to be promiscuous in a way from guys and from women, but there's not the actual actions, realization of that. So they're doing it virtually, they're doing it in through pornography, and that's another thing we'll talk about. But
I also did an entire episode on my podcast, the Love Lab podcast, by the way, if you don't know which one I'm referring to, that it was titled, Your Ancestors Had More Sex Than You Do. And that was the whole premise of that, was to show that your ancestors actually had more sex. And so one of the interesting things is that you think that by having more freedom through the dating apps and, through the more modern values, that somehow that's going to lead to more sex or better sex. And the data really shows that that's really not the case. The younger generations today are having significantly less sex than their ancestors did, than their grandparents did, or even their parents did. And, we see this all the time. Humans do this a lot. We swing from one side of the spectrum to the other, right? The pendulum is like way over here and then it swings over here. So in the old days, there's this idea that people were trapped in their marriages and they were stuck and that's it, and if you weren't having sex, that's it. You were never going to have sex again. And it was all terrible and horrible, right? And then we swing to the other side, which is we have no committed relationships at all, and everybody's just running around having sex with everybody, and it's totally free in sexual revolution, and somehow this is going to make everything better. But the stats, of course, that we read in the beginning of the show that people are less happy when they're not married. And we didn't pull up any actual statistics on this, but we know, and I've done whole shows on this, that the younger generations are having less sex. So the reality is that if you actually have a committed relationship instead of just, trying to sleep with as many people as you can, not only will you probably have more sex, according to the statistics anyway, but the quality of the sex that you have is going to be significantly better.
Yeah. So it's kind of like farmers versus the hunter-gatherers, right? So farmers would typically have more food because they're growing their crops and they're taking care of the field that they're growing their crops on, and they're nurturing it, they're watering it, and they get that every cycle. They're getting more crops, as opposed to the hunter-gatherers who had to go out into the woods and hunt for their next meal, which may or may not even exist. And so you might say the hunter-gatherers were more free and they were having more options for food. But the farmers were actually consistently eating and having those great meals and having Thanksgiving dinners. And so, it's like the power of the committed relationship versus the hookup culture is that they actually get what they actually want, or what people think that they want, both men and women, which is, I want to have more sex and I want to have more freedom. Well, what if you can actually have more experiences with a partner in a committed relationship, both sexually and in other ways? And it's more consistent, you're happier, and you actually get what you really want, which is the happiness, rather than just, I want the freedom of it, or I want the ability to, if I like somebody, that I can just have sex with them, and why shouldn't I? He's hot, I'm available, I'm just gonna have sex with him. And then that's it. It's like a one-night stand, maybe a two-night stand. It's a fling, but he's not really committing to you, and he goes to some other woman then and does the same thing, and then he's not really having the benefit of commitment because he's like, well, all these women are just having sex with me, and maybe I don't really want to just go with one. And so he's not even getting the real benefits for himself either, because the women are throwing themselves at him. So men and women are kind of screwing themselves over when those gates are open.
I was having a conversation with a male friend of mine the other day who hasn't been in a relationship for about a year. And he's really feeling this strong desire. He's like, man, I haven't had sex in a long time. And he's like, so then he says to me, what I really need to do is I just need to find a woman who's just like super skilled and knows all these tantric techniques and can just go really deep, and we can just have this amazing, crazy deep tantric sex. And I was like, you realize it doesn't work that way, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, for a woman to go really deep into sex, to have the kind of sex that you're describing, she can't do that on a one-night stand. Or maybe there's a few rare outliers that could. But for a woman to really open to that level of sexual connection, she needs to feel safe. She needs to trust you. She needs to feel you're committed to her. That's the only way she's going to open wide up and receive all of you. It's the only way it's going to happen. So there's this idea that if I have sex with a bunch of different women, or, I've got way more to choose from, or I find one that's some tantric goddess, that somehow this is going to be the ultimate, right? And the reality is the ultimate is once you've been together for a while and you've established the safety and trust and the depth of the connection, and you've grown into this sexual union and relationship, that's when it starts to get really off the charts good, right? But a lot of people don't realize that. They think that, no, in the context of the relationship, there's always the stereotypes of, once you marry him, that's it, the sex stops. Like, people still comment this stuff on my YouTube videos. I had a guy comment on a video I did with another female sex expert about blowjobs, and he was just like, well, once they get you to sign on the dotted line, it's like no more blowjobs ever again because women hate them and they will never do it. They only do it to try to get you to marry them. And I'm like, wow, that has not been my experience at all.
Yeah.
But those are some of the stereotypes that are out there. And the reality is, okay, that does happen in some relationships, but that's only because you basically did a bad job of picking a partner. If you actually pick a good partner and you have a good relationship that you've spent time nurturing, right, and growing together, you're going to have the exact opposite experience.
Yeah, speaking of sex, also, if you want to get more of Kevin's resources around sex and mastering that, you can get those in the link below as well, kevinandceline.com/link in bio.
That's right. That's the place to go where all my programs are, my online courses, my coaching programs, and my podcast and everything else.
All right, awesome. Well, let's go rapid fire through some of these last ones. So I wanted to mention we have fourth wave feminism and hatred and resentment of men. We have focus on career over relationships, pornography, and the oversexualization of everything. And there's a couple other good ones too. So why don't we go into shortened attention spans is good. Why don't we go into, do you want to talk about hatred and resentment of men that is built up?
Sure. I mean, this is kind of one of the things. I had a couple things on my list, like intentional destruction of the family unit and demonizing the traditional family.
Yeah.
All of these things are actually kind of linked together.
Yeah.
There has absolutely been an intentional effort to split up the family. And so, when we talk about fourth wave feminism, when you go look at the first wave feminism or even second wave feminism, vastly different from the fourth and now fifth, and some people are even saying there's a sixth wave out there.
I don't even know.
At some point in that process, it shifted away from being, hey, we just want to be equal with our men, which was totally reasonable, into, we don't need men. Men suck. They're mean. They're evil. They're terrible. They're toxic, all that kind of stuff. And that has done a real disservice to not only men. It's obvious how it did a disservice to men, but it's also done a massive disservice to women, right? Because now you've got all these women that are basically just jaded and angry at men rather than seeing men as the beautiful gift that they can be, right? So if we think about the classic symbolism of the yin yang, right? It's perfect balance and harmony of masculine and feminine, light and dark, positive and negative polarities, right? It symbolizes all those things. And so that's what a relationship truly can be. So if you're in that place where you are hating the masculine or pissed off at the masculine or it's all about patriarchy, you are never going to be able to have that kind of a relationship with a man. You're just not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and what happens is also anytime you resent something, you're less likely to attract that into your life. So this is especially true for the single women out there and the women that we've worked with. If you're finding that you have any resentment towards men because of a man who has hurt you in the past, maybe you were abused when you were younger, bad things have happened, or to those that you know, because of course there are bad men out there and there's bad things that'll happen, and there's probably bad things that have happened to you and bad experiences. But what happens is then when you take that and you generalize it to all men, or you put it on into your next relationship of like, oh, my last partner cheated on me, so this man is probably also going to cheat on me, so I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to basically already make him guilty until proven innocent. What happens is you tend to create that which you resent, so then you tend to attract through things like the law of attraction, which is a very popular principle. You tend to see those in all the men that you date, you tend to see those traits right away, and you tend to also attract those types of men into your reality, the types of men who will cheat on you, abuse you, hurt you in some way. And so it's because it frames who you're being in relation to the man. You become a complement to that which you're focused on. So you start to become a woman who's closed off, who's in her masculine, who's distrusting, which then causes a man to feel disrespected, distrusted, not wanted, not valued. And so, of course, he doesn't want to give to you, and he doesn't want to be the hero for you. He doesn't want to give to you in that way because you're not receptive to it. You're not open. You're not in your magnetic feminine energy that actually draws in a healthy masculine man who wants to protect you, who wants to provide for you, who wants to be your hero. because those men exist as well. There are heroes out there. There are good men out there who want to make you happy, who want to help you, who want to protect you and provide for you. And so if you can see that and you can start to appreciate those men and appreciate those traits inside of your man, you call it out within him. That's exactly what we teach in our courses, in our coaching, how to become this woman who draws those type of men to you. And the men that you're with, you draw that kind of energy out from him, because the law of polarity states opposite energies attract. Masculine energy attracts feminine energy. So when you become more in your feminine, your healthy feminine, you're going to start attracting men who are more in their healthy masculine. By default, in your specific man, you'll become more feminine. You're going to become him, attract him being more in his healthy masculine for you. He's going to start caring for and devoting himself to you. So it all starts with what you're focusing on. And that's why if you're caught into the conversation of feminism, resentment towards men are bad, patriarchy, etc., you're just going to attract more of that behavior and those actions and those characteristics in the men around you. But if you shift out of that towards appreciation, gratitude, openness, vulnerability, asking men for help, sharing with men the things that you see that are good about them, that you love about them, you're going to attract more of that to you, and you'll have a completely different experience than some of those other women who are resentful towards men and the conversations that are happening in culture.
Yeah, and you'll attract more of that. And part of it is also you'll start to recognize it when you couldn't see it before. So like the perfect example is like, you ever decide you want to buy a new car, right? And you do all this time researching it, and you figure out this is the model that you want. And then suddenly you're driving down the street and you're like, oh, look, there's one right there. Oh, look, there's another one. And there's another one. And you're like, I didn't realize there were so many of them on the road.
There's a quality man. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Right. How come I never noticed that before,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing here. When you see people who are always talking about health problems, right? And you notice they have the most health problems, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. If you're always focusing on the negative and how evil men are and how bad they are and how toxic they are, you're going to just constantly see toxic men everywhere you go.
Yeah.
But if you're focusing on how good men are, and the ways that they show up for you and how they complement your life and all that stuff, you'll start seeing those good men everywhere. I had a woman on my show, her name was Karen, and we were kind of talking a little bit about this subject. And from her perspective, she's just like, men are amazing. She's like, everywhere I go, I meet the most amazing men. They help me. They carry my stuff. They buy me things. Like, I don't ask for any of it. She's like, they just do it for me, right?
That's great.
But that's because that's the mindset she's in. That's where she's at. And she's open and receptive to receiving that. And therefore, she just draws it in like crazy.
Yeah, like men just want to help me. Men just want to do things for me. I don't even know why. I just always attract these amazing men that want to commit to me and want to treat me like a queen, and they're super attractive and they're hot and they're exciting and they're loving and supportive, and it's just so easy for me. Relationships are so simple, fun, and easy. It's just I just love it. I love my life. I love being with these guys. But those are the kind of the stories and the thoughts and the affirmations that start to draw that in. That's a big part of the inner aspects of becoming entering into the magnetic feminine, is shifting your conversation you're having with yourself and with your girlfriends too, and with your family around men and what men are and what men want and what men do. And those kind of conversations will shift a lot for you, which actually leads us into the next piece here that I almost skipped over, which is confusion and conflicting gender roles and lack of polarity. And we're seeing this as a huge problem in our modern society today. As what is a woman? What is a man? We don't know anymore.
That was a great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, recommend. People have lost this basic fundamental that we've had for thousands of years on what it takes to actually create polarity in a relationship and to create these dynamics that cause attraction, chemistry, devotion, and love. And again, it goes back to you saying earlier about the agenda to destroy the family unit and to destroy relationships between men and women that is out there. Well, we heal that by actually remembering what is inside of us, because every woman has at her core a feminine essence. Every man has in his core a masculine essence. And so you can tap into that feminine essence at any time. It existed the moment you were born. As with a man, his masculine essence existed the moment he was born. And you can bring that out within yourself, because we don't teach you in any of our courses or coaching how to be something you're not. Like, what we're actually teaching you is how to own who you really are at your core, bringing that back out, that feminine essence, that feminine play. Like, you can have fun, you can be curious, you can be open and available, and and reconnect with that feminine part of yourself, that feminine core that is expressed in so many different ways. The queen archetype, the magician, the priestess, as my wife calls it, or the wild woman. There's so many expressions of your feminine core that will attract a masculine man, that'll attract a man who wants to care and devote himself to you because he feels that attraction. He feels that polarity. That's like a dance, right? You can't have a dance if both people are trying to lead the dance and saying, oh, no, I want to take over. No, I want to take over. No, come over here. Just like you can't drive a car. If both people are trying to drive the car, you're going to crash. The car is going to end up in not a great situation because of that. And so when you can learn that dance of the masculine and the feminine, you can have incredible relationships.
Yeah, this whole crazy nonsense about trying to basically make men and women equal, this sort of getting rid of gender. There's a woman's whatever you say it is, and a man's whatever you say it is, and everything's just gender neutral now. So everything you said is correct. It destroys the polarity, right? So I don't need to cover that anymore. But I want to bring another piece into it, which is that people think that when they're doing that, smoothing it over, making everything equal, that, well, we're just getting rid of the toxic masculine traits, right? But that's not actually what's really happening. Yeah, you might get rid of some toxic masculine traits, but you're also losing all of the things that actually attract you to a man, the qualities that you're actually looking for in a man. And the crazy thing is I have had literally like hardcore feminists, I've had conversations about this, and when I say, well, if a man does this for you, would you like it? And they're like, well, yeah, of course. Right? Yeah. It's like when you separate individual characteristics or behaviors of the masculine, you ask them pointedly about those things. So they're like, yeah, well, of course, I would love that, right?
Yeah. I love it when he pays for dinner and I don't have to pay.
Right, exactly. Like,
or he
seriously.
opens the door for me.
Hardcore feminists who are like,
fixes things for me.
Well, yeah, of course you should pay for dinner. It's like the problem with neutralizing all of the gender, aside from the fact that you're killing the polarity, is you're actually losing the very things that you were attracted to from the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And this goes for women too. The things that attract us as men to women get lost when we do that. Same thing like the things that attract you to us as men get lost when you get rid of the gender and you just try to make everything equal across the board. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, so it's a big challenge. And so really the big solutions for that are using everything we teach you in our courses, in our communities, in our training around how to become the magnetic feminine woman and shifting from resentment to appreciation. We already talked about practicing feminine communication and acknowledging the positive contributions of men and focusing on fostering mutual respect and understanding. So when we can do that, we can actually, that was part of the resentment piece, but we could also then shift into the feminine energy with your vulnerability, with expressing your desires, so many things that go into that so that you can have a healthy, polarized relationship where you can just relax, enjoy, and he will lead just like in a dance for your pleasure and for his pleasure. He will solve problems. He will want to help you. He will want to give to you. He will want to protect you and be your hero and make you happy, please you, but in a good way that's from his healthy masculine, where he's not a people pleaser or a nice guy, but really he's a guy you're excited about, attracted to, doing those things that make you feel like a woman, make you feel great. You can relax and enjoy and let him handle it.
I think it's really interesting because in our society, we have very conflicting messages. So on the one hand, we're constantly told over and over and over again that diversity is our strength, right? That the differences between us as people are actually what make us stronger. And then at the same time, they're telling us that there's no differences between men and women and that we have to stop saying that there's any differences between men and women.
I didn't even think about that one. That's a good point. Yeah,
but it's
an
absolute contradiction.
Yeah.
It's no different. I agree that diversity does make us stronger. If we have people with diverse backgrounds and diverse knowledge, right, and diverse skill sets, that makes us stronger as a whole. And you have to realize that the same thing is true in your relationship. We don't want men and women to be the same. And the sooner that you can realize that it's those actual differences that make the difference, that make the relationship stronger and healthier and function better, you're going to start having better relationships.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so the last one we'll talk about for today, really important one, is, which we kind of talked about a bit already, which is pornography and the oversexualization of everything. So the easy access of pornography and hypersexualized media has distorted healthy views of intimacy, making it harder for men and women to connect emotionally and build deep, committed relationships. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh man, you started this one at the end of the show.
Yeah,
we could do a whole show on this.
Because we've already talked about a lot of aspects around that, maybe we'll just get some more nuggets around it.
Okay, so we kind of talked about this when we were talking about social media, but the reality is that porn is not real. Mm-hmm. It is not real at all. I keep bringing up my podcast because I've covered all of these topics. I actually had one of the most successful male porn stars of all time on my podcast. And the title of that was something like, how to have sex like a porn star, and then quotes, or not, right? and the whole premise of that, the whole premise of that show was to have somebody who did this for a living at like the highest level a man can do it, to come on and tell us that this is all fantasy. This stuff is fake. After he was done actually starring in porn, he became a director of porn. And so he would tell you, he's like, look, the way I would actually have sex, like with a real woman, is nowhere near the way it shows up on camera. Why? Because actual sex doesn't look good on camera. He's like, you can't see anything. He's like,
you're both totally interlocked and passionately kissing each other and feeling each other. and the cameras can't see anything with that.
No, and he gave lots of examples, right? So it's another one of those things where you have to realize that it's all fake. The way they have sex is fake. The reactions to the things they're doing to each other are fake, right?
Yeah.
And when she's screaming her head off 3 minutes into the lovemaking, it's not real. She's not that turned on or that excited yet. Trust me, she's not. She's faking it. If she is, it's only because she was having sex off camera for 20 minutes before they said roll the camera, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all fake. You also have in there something very similar to what we were talking about with the comparison piece, which is you're looking at a bunch of people that are on the far end of the spectrum. In other words, the guys always have bigger muscles than just about every other guy you're ever going to run into in day-to-day life. They also have abnormally large penises, like not just above average, but like way above average, right? The women have way above average breasts. Most of them are fake, by the way, right? Their figures, their hair, their nail, like everything about this idea of pornography, for the most part, is fake. And so and here's the problem. Here's what happens, especially for men, is when they start watching a lot of porn, they start getting really like their preferences for what they like, what they want in a woman, start to get attuned to what they're seeing in the porn all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And so, they are suddenly, and you'll hear them say this. They're like, well, I don't get turned on. I'm not really attracted to my woman. Well, why? Well, because your woman is not like the woman in the porn movie who's 5'10", 120 pounds, perfect butt, like perfect boobs, long blonde hair, beautiful. Like they don't look like that, right? And so you get attuned through the porn to unrealistic standards, right? And then you look at your real life and you're like, ugh. It's like watching a black and white movie, right? Let me switch it around. It's like watching a color movie first, right? And then going to black and white, and you're like,
yeah.
But the color's not real.
Boring.
It's fake. It was painted on, right?
Yeah.
You know, the black and white is the reality, and so porn can have some really negative consequences when used inappropriately, and it can have real negative repercussions in your relationship.
Yeah, and it's also, so pornography is a big piece, and then there's also the over-sexualization of everything, which I use that term because I feel that everything in terms of social media and our movies, everything is now being infused with sexual energy and sexual imagery, especially directed towards men. And what this is, just to be aware of as a woman, for women listening here, is just to realize that this is happening, and some women are contributing to it. A lot of women are contributing to it. A lot of men are contributing to it, obviously. And bringing out this kind of like, oh, if I want to be loved by a man, I have to then compete with this. I need to be more sexy. I need to show more cleavage in my photos. I need to show more bikini shots. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the attention that I want. And so, but that's the wrong route to think of it as, if you're thinking you have to compete with what is available for a man, you don't want to compete on that level, because like what Kevin's saying here, it's all fantasy, and now it's done with AI. You can't compete with that, essentially. You don't want to compete with that. What you want to compete with is, rather than the sexualization, you want to go into the emotional game and the intimacy game, because how you're actually going to attract a man, especially the kind of man that you want long term, is not through trying to be his sexual fantasy, although that'll help once you're in a committed relationship and you're intimate together and learning what Kevin teaches with sexuality. But if you can connect with a man emotionally, and if you can use what we're teaching you here and in our courses around magnetic feminine polarity, magnetic feminine communication, you can attract a man on a much deeper level where he feels the energetics of the attraction, where you might not be the most attractive woman, you might not be the sexiest, quote unquote, or have the perfect butt or the perfect boobs or whatever, perfect skin, or you could be older. It doesn't matter, whatever you look like physically, in your age, your body structure. You can attract a man energetically through that principle of masculine feminine polarity, and that can override that, and that's going to attract the man's attention and attract his devotion much more than you just being another sexy woman on available to him.
Yes, and especially you're going to end up attracting the good quality men, the ones that can see past that, the ones that will love you and be attracted to you for who you are, not just what you look like. And I tell you, I have a lot of conversations with single men about this when they're like, I just can't find the right woman, and you ask them a lot of questions, and it turns out they've got this unrealistic expectation of what this woman should look like. And it's almost always around looks. She needs to be this tall, this color hair, this whatever. And I'm always trying to tell them, okay, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. However, if that's all you're looking for, you're going to miss the right woman. You're absolutely going to miss her. But what you should be looking for, in fact, I did an entire video on my YouTube channel about this, about the actual qualities that you should look for in a woman. Because I was trying to help these men understand what's truly important. These are the things that are truly important to look for. You're looking for a good woman first and foremost, right? And if she's also attractive, great, right? And there has to at least, of course, be a base level of attraction there. But anyway, the point is that you don't want to be unrealistic in your expectations, because you're going to miss the right person.
Yes, yeah, and it goes both ways, because that goes back to what we're saying with social media comparison. Is we've also met women who also have very high standards as far as what they want a man to physically look like or be like.
Oh yeah, every one of them
Totally
wants him to be
unrealistic.
6 foot tall, 190 pounds, big muscles, blue eyes, brown hair, and he needs to be this, and this, and it's like there actually was a great podcast on this. I can't remember the name of the podcast. But the guy, you probably would know it. But anyway, it's one guy, the host, and then he's got 6 young women, and he asks them these questions. What are you looking for in a man?
Podcast.
I think that's what it is. And every one of them gave this crazy unrealistic description of how much money he needed to make, what he needed to look like. And then he went and pulled up the statistics. How many men fall into that category? How many men make that much money? How many men are actually that tall? How many men actually are this? And it was like this tiny fraction in every category, right? It's just unrealistic.
Yeah. So, but the challenge, the cause of that is what we went back to earlier, is the social media technology aspects, and the oversexualization of society is a big piece of that too, where we're living in these fantasy worlds that's actually causing us to miss out on having the best possible life we can in reality, which is actually going to make us more happy than we thought we would get in the fantasy, because it's real, and because it's actually, we get what we need, and rather than what we thought we wanted, we actually get what is good for our system, the healthy. It's just like you could eat junk food all day long, but then when you actually have a healthy organic meal with all the right balance of proteins and carbs and everything, you're like, I feel great after this.
Man, it's like the Rolling Stones said all those years ago,
You can't always get what you want.
Yeah, you can't always get what you want, but if you try some time, you just might find you get what you need.
And with that, I think we need to wrap it up for today. So that was a great ending note. Hope this was helpful to everyone. Continue to dive into the overall solutions that we recommend, which is getting the magnetic feminine polarity and the principles of magnetic feminine communication right, so you can have the relationship that you actually desire. Again, you can take our quiz to get that with the link in the comments, and then we will look forward to seeing you again in our next powerful training. Much love. Take care. Talk to you later.